This video highlights some of the steps involved in installing the Dayco timing belt kit number 95333K1 on a 2004 Volkswagen Jetta with the 1.9-liter TDI 4-cylinder diesel engine. The kit includes a high-performance, high-temperature timing belt number 95333, an OEM quality tensioner, and an idler pulley. As usual, instructions are included in the kit. These instructions should be followed exactly. For safety's sake, the key should be removed from the ignition, and the negative battery cable should be disconnected. The auto data instructions list begins with the items that need to be removed in order to provide access to the accessory belt and timing belt drives. The following video contains some, but not all of the steps listed in the instructions. The front end of the vehicle should be jacked up and then supported by jack stands. Remove the right front wheel, then the wheel tub, and finally, splash pans. This will provide access to the bottom of the accessory drive, the crankshaft harmonic balancer and pulley, and the intercooler. The turbo hoses will have to be removed to access the crankshaft balancer and sprocket and the accessory drive. At the top of the engine compartment, unbolt and remove the engine cover. Also, unbolt and remove the coolant fill tank, disconnecting the hose from the radiator. Next, disconnect and remove the intercooler intake hose. Toward the front of the engine compartment, remove the headlight bucket so you can remove the front intercooler intake ducting and any fuel lines that might get in the way. Here's a view looking down the right fender after the fuel vapor filter canister and windshield wiper fluid reservoir have been removed. With these items out of the way, access was gained to the clip on the turbocharger intercooler inlet tube. The next item to focus on is the power steering reservoir and its attached hose. Removing the reservoir and bending back the hose will permit much easier access to the motor mount beneath them. After draining the power steering reservoir, its hose can be bent back and it can be parked on top of the strut tower. The next step is to remove parts of the accessory drive. Engage a wrench onto the square tab at the top of the tensioner and rotate it to release tension on the belt. Now the belt can be removed from around the accessory drive pulleys. The accessory drive belt is a dual-side poly V. The side that has been running against a flat pulley has ribs that are worn down and shallow. Some pilling can be seen on both sides of the belt. This belt is ready for replacement. The tensioner should be removed and tested to see if it also needs replacement. The alternator pulley was making noise when the vehicle was brought in and has a lot of play, so it will definitely be replaced. Looking at the top of the engine compartment, this is the top half of the timing drive cover, which has been removed. The notch in the bottom edge fits around the upper motor mount bracket, which has been unbolted and slid to the rear. Completely removing the motor mount is extremely difficult, and this placement still allows adequate access to the timing drive belt and actuating tensioner. The next step would be to remove the bottom half of the timing drive cover. With the lower timing drive cover removed, this is the view looking upward from the crankshaft pulley toward the water pump, which shows signs that it was leaking coolant. This water pump will be replaced as part of this service. To facilitate the manual rotation of the engine in a few minutes, the glow plug should be removed in order to eliminate compression within the cylinders. Here is the kit mentioned earlier that will be installed, the Dayco timing belt kit number 95333K1 with components. It includes Dayco's high-performance, high-temperature belt. The kit also includes an automatic tensioner. When the preload is set correctly after installation, this point will be centered in this window. The kit also contains the auto data instructions for the application. If these instructions are consulted at this point in the process, it can be seen that the current step is removal step number 8. Turn the crankshaft clockwise until the number 1 cylinder is at top dead center of the compression stroke. Continuing, step number 9 is ensure that the timing mark is aligned with the notch on the camshaft sprocket hub 4Z, which is shown on the drawing as illustration 8. This shows the back of the cam cover at the cylinder head at about the 3 o'clock position. There will be an arrow with 4Z on it, which should align with the notch on the camshaft sprocket hub. Here's the actual 4Z arrow that is molded into the back of the timing drive cover. If the camera is moved to the right, the notch can be seen on the reluctor ring behind the cam sprocket. This notch actually serves as the trigger for the cam sensor. Next, step number 10 says, Lock camshaft. Use tool number 3359. Here's the camshaft with the installation pin tool installed. It goes through the sprocket into the designation hole in the cylinder head. Its purpose is to hold the internal assembly in the proper location. These bolts will be loosened in order to get the belt tension set correctly on the tight side of the belt. That allows this sprocket to be a floater while the belt tension is being adjusted, while the pin is holding the internal assembly in place for perfect timing. Step number 11 says, Lock the crankshaft sprocket. Use tool number T10050. Back in the wheel tub on the passenger side, alignment marks have been made on the crankshaft sprocket and the front of the engine case. This is where the locking fixture tool will be applied. Going to the instructions, Illustration 11 shows the crankshaft with the 2 alignment marks. Illustration 10 indicates the locking tool that holds the crankshaft in position. Here is a shot of the locking tool in position on the crankshaft, and here's an even closer look. Some versions of this tool have a knob on the end to make installation easier. Step number 13 indicates that it is time to loosen the camshaft sprocket bolts until the sprocket can be moved within the slotted holes. Break the camshaft sprocket bolts and loosen a few turns. These bolts will eventually be retightened to the correct torque. Step number 14 is loosen the tensioner pulley nut, which is indicated in illustration 13 in the drawing. While loosening the tensioner pulley nut, at some point the spring will unload, thereby loosening the tension on the timing belt so it can be removed. The old timing belt and tensioner have now been removed. To review, the following steps have been taken to ensure proper alignment of the drive during the installation of the new timing belt. A new water pump has been installed to replace the old leaking pump. A new slack side idler has been installed. Dayco strongly recommends that all hardware be replaced on a timing drive while this level of access is available. The cost of labor to get back inside the drive again later far exceeds the hardware cost. Continuing with the steps, the crankshaft locking tool has been inserted into the hole in the engine so that the red arrow on the tool lines up with the mark on the sprocket. Here's a view from above to show how the tool fits. The camshaft installation pin has been inserted through a slot in the camshaft sprocket into the cylinder head to keep the internal assembly in place so that the notch in the reluctor ring is aligned with the 4Z arrow molded into the back of the cover. Removing the sprocket allows a much better view of the reluctor ring and its notch. Before the new belt is installed, the new tensioner must be installed and adjusted. On the back side of the tensioner, there is a retaining lug that fits into an indentation in the back of the engine case. Removing the camshaft sprocket gives a clear view of the indentation into which it must index. The retaining lug can be seen in illustration number 16. The tensioner is slid onto its mounting stud, with the retaining lug properly indexed into the indentation. A slight wiggle will verify this. Next, the tensioner nut is threaded onto the mounting stud, finger tight. Installation step number 4 calls for the insertion of the tensioner locking pin before installing the tensioner, but it can also be done after step number 5. Now it's time for the new belt installation. The belt is typically installed so that the belt label reads correctly in the direction of rotation, in this case, left to right. The installation should begin at the crankshaft pulley and proceed in a clockwise direction according to step number 7. Once the belt has been loosely fitted around the correct routing for the drive, the next step is tensioning. The bolt in the camshaft sprocket must be backed off enough for the sprocket to turn freely. The tensioner nut must also turn freely, and the tensioner locking pin must still be installed. The drive is now ready for the correct tensioning adjustment. Following step number 9, turn the tensioner pulley counterclockwise until the locking pin can be removed. Next, the locking pin is removed. In step number 11, the tensioner pulley is slowly rotated clockwise until the pointer is aligned with the notch in the window. Here is a close-up of the correct alignment of the pointer in the window. The tensioner nut is ready for an initial tightening, and then a final tightening to the torque spec in step number 12 to 15 foot-pounds, plus an additional arc of 45 degrees tighter. Next, the camshaft sprocket bolts are torqued to 19 foot-pounds. Now the camshaft locking tool can be removed, as well as the crankshaft locking tool. Next, step number 15 should be followed to rotate the crankshaft slowly 2 turns clockwise until the number 1 cylinder is at top dead center of the compression stroke. Now the crankshaft sprocket locking tool is reinstalled, while slowly turning the crankshaft to top dead center using tool number T10050. Next, step number 17 says, to ensure the timing marks are aligned. Step 18 says, to ensure that the tensioner pulley pointer is aligned with the notch. And step 19 says, to ensure that the camshaft locking tool can be inserted easily. If these steps are successful, remove the crankshaft sprocket locking tool, then reinstall the vehicle components that were removed to access the drive. Torque specs for the various bolts involved can be found in the instructions steps 23 through 28. The engine should be started for a short run-in to make sure the timing drive has been correctly replaced.